So, about 2 years ago, I was in the Phoenix area with my husband for a conference, and we met Brent and his wife at Oregano's in Mesa, and we had a delightful dinner. It was about 3 hours long, and I had to apologize to his wife. I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm talking so much, but your husband is so fascinating. And we learned a lot about a lot of things that evening. And as I have thought about allostatic load, it's something that I refer to and I know about it, but I thought I would really love to do a podcast on it. And Brent popped into my head. He is so wise. He's so intelligent. He's an expert on a lot of things. Everybody's an expert in something. Brent is an expert in a lot of things. And he just is so fun for me to talk to. He's very intelligent. He uses big, beautiful words. And I hope you enjoy this conversation of how we talk about allostatic load. So I had to break it up into two parts because we talked for a while. But here is part one. Enjoy. Welcome to Burnout Solutions. My name is Mona Tippett. I am a registered nurse, a life coach, an emotional resiliency expert, and a mom. I love to help healthcare workers and caretakers and just busy, capable people understand their brain and nervous system so stress, overwhelm, and frustration do not run their life. Here on this podcast, we break down burnout, emotional overload, and survival patterns in simple human language. I love to give you practical ways to feel safer, calmer, and more present in your everyday life. You do not need fixing. What you need is support and a nervous system that knows that it's safe. Thanks for being here. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today on Burnout Solutions, I have a very special guest, and this is Brent Bartel. He is one of my favorite coaches from the life coach school that I went to. And I have known him for, how many years, Brent? 3?
Probably 3.
2, 4?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Feels like 20.
It does feel like 20. He's one of the few who I have actually met in person because all of our interactions were virtual, right? When we were in the Mindful Method.
Yes.
And he lives in the Mesa area. Anyway, I'm so excited to have him here. He is an expert in self-improvement, and his whole entire career has been in various jobs and just doing personal development. And he's great. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so glad that he's here. And we today are talking about allostatic load, which you may or may not know what that is, but Brent is an expert on it. And that's why I have him here. So, Brent, do you want to say anything more about you, about how cool you are?
Yeah, that is highly debatable. In fact, ask my kids about that. They'll give you a very different version. But thank you for having me. I'm genuinely excited to be able to be here and have this conversation. We were having a conversation offline, and I gushed a little over the progress you've made and the things that you're doing and the good you're putting out in the world and the success of your podcast and all the many things. I'm excited to be with you.
Yeah,
I did.
It's going to be a good day today.
Oh, it'll be a good day. My son used to say, "It's a good day, Dad." I said, "Yeah, absolutely." But anyway, I spent like 34 years in higher education and enjoyed that. And I had adjunct responsibilities in professional and personal development. I was a FranklinCovey guy. That perhaps dates me a little bit, but probably for 25 years, I had the privilege of facilitating their curriculum and was very involved in that work and seemed to be a natural extension of my passion and that kind of avocation in my retirement years or in my next chapter. Took up coaching, and it's been fun. Yeah. It's been fun.
Cool. Okay, well, let's just get into it. We're talking about allostasis. And I have used that term before in my podcasts, but I don't know that it's a common enough term that everyone would know what it means. So do you want to define it?
I would love to, yes. And you will be eminently cooler at dinner parties. You start tossing around the word allostasis and allostatic load. So, allostasis is sort of related to and akin to homeostasis. So, this body is such a magnificent vessel, and it has this, what should we say, this predisposition towards balance and towards equilibrium. In fact, it's essential to our survival that we can maintain processes within a certain acceptable range to function optimally. So obviously, my body wants to be at homeostasis. My body likes to be at 98.6 degrees or somewhere between 98 and 99. Regular respiration likes to happen within a certain parameters. So that is just part of being a highly functioning human being. Allostasis looks just a little different. So allostasis is essentially, it's this beautiful and essential set of processes in the body that allow for adaptation and survival. So it's essentially the things that happen internally, often in response to external kind of stimuli that get me back to homeostasis, if that makes any sense. And we'll do a little deeper dive around that and try to work through that and use some examples. But so shivering or temperature starts coming down, my body says we need to warm up. What do I do? What's my mechanism? A shiver. That's allostasis. Live in Arizona. I think it was 184 degrees last year, a couple days in the summer. Not really, but it feels like temperature. We were probably close. So obviously perspiration is an allostatic response to cool the body down. I eat that ice cream sundae and my pancreas produces copious amounts of insulin. That once again is an allostatic response to temporary imbalance. So allostasis is a beautiful thing, and it's happening continually all the time in the body. So that's not the problem. And as it gets us more towards homeostasis, that's a very good thing.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
so it's basically just the body stabilizing itself when it encounters something that's asking it to change or something that would throw it out of balance. It always wants to be in balance.
exactly.
True?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, it always wants to be in balance. And yeah, and so it's multifactorial. We have all these systems of hormones and neurotransmitters and all the things that most of us have no idea about that,
Yeah.
are happening inside our body to get us back to a place where
But
we're
that's so
balanced
cool. Yes.
and we're functioning. Oh, it is so immensely cool. Yes, and so complex.
Awesome. Okay.
Yes.
So allostatic load is coming back to homeostasis, back to stability. We've used some metaphors. So let's talk about how does our allostatic load increase and why is that a problem?
Yeah. So let's talk about the load just for a second. Let's see. So load is really the wear and tear on the body that accumulates over time when this stress response is constantly activated or fails to shut off properly. So think about it. It's the physiological cost. So I'm going to come back to that a few times. So there's a psychological dynamic here, emotional, things like that. But we're going to talk about the physiological, the physical and biochemical kind of cost of chronic adaptation. If I think about it like a car, my son has a souped up Mustang, and sometimes he likes to get on it, as he tells me, much to his father's chagrin. We should not be getting on it. So, but he revs it a little high. And if you rev it a little high and it comes back down to normal RPM range, it's no big deal, is it? However, if the RPMs stay high for protracted periods of time, that can be a problem. Engine breakdown, all those other kinds of things. So the same thing is true with our body. It's not the stress itself, because we are designed to adapt to the stress. It's the repeated hits, and it's the lack of sufficient recovery in between. That's the problem. I think about it, this is a really bad metaphor, but it's like a visitor that comes for Christmas. If I'm preparing for a performance or I have to give a speech or, I have a really, tense conversation coming up with my boss, there's some allostasis happening. Blood pressure's rates up. I may be perspiring. Some things are happening inside my body to prepare me for that. It
Yeah.
feels like a bit of a threat. It probably isn't. I'm not being chased by a grizzly bear, but it feels threatening.
Yeah.
So my body is responding to that. Once that is over, the visitor should leave, theoretically. but sometimes it sticks around. Christmas is done, and that house visitor is still here, and we're
Still
rolling in
here.
New Year, they're still here. And some of those allostatic responses are still happening inside my body. Blood pressure's still up hours later. Next day, I have a headache. I can't come back down to baseline. So that's when the load becomes deleterious. It's a big, stupid word for just harmful for the body. And so it's really about managing the load and coming back down to baseline in a timely way. So allostasis is doing its thing, but we don't start accumulating load, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, but this, I'm thinking of like healthcare workers and people who just have repeated stress. I think parents can fit in there.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think of a load that can increase maybe while you are sick or going through chemotherapy or a divorce or, anything in life that has stress, repetitive stress over and over
Yeah.
again,
Yes.
which,
Yes.
when I was a labor and delivery nurse and working triage, you would go from one bed to the next, and you're taking care of patients that are all in a very stressful situation. They're in pain. There's, something
Right.
preterm labor, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
something going on. And so my body would be exposed to a stressful situation just repetitively throughout 12 hours.
Right.
Right.
Ab- Absolutely. Yes. And that's probably just a normal, healthy part of functioning. Now, like I said, I'm always really careful of binaries. Have allostatic load or you don't. I think most things are on a continuum. It's
Yeah.
not either yes or no, it's just how much. And is it dysfunctional? And is it affecting the overall well functioning of the body? So you do your 12-hour shift. And I have the greatest respect for nurses and the work they do. And then they step off stage. What happens? Can they return to baseline? Do they live it over and over? Do they carry some of that with them? Do they come in the next day or maybe 3 days later? And they're still kind of in a hyperactivated state and they're still feeling somewhat dysregulated. That, I think, is when it becomes problematic.
Yep, for sure. And that's how they get burned out.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. And that's how we can get burned out for sure. So maybe just a few examples. Can we do
Yeah,
that?
let's do
Just
some more examples.
in terms of just allostasis. I don't want to dig too deeply, but I want to give your listeners a sense of what that really is. So like white coat syndrome, I'm sure you know all about that as a nurse and being a practitioner. Your blood pressure should stay within a normal range. You walk into a doctor's office and it's not that scary. They're not going to remove your brain. It's not going to be terrible. But for so many of us, just sitting on the exam table, your blood pressure can go up 30 points. That's an allostatic response to what your brain perceives as a challenge. I'm going to use that term a lot, perceives,
Yes.
because
Yes.
obviously, perception is reality, right? We all know that. Things like circadian rhythms and cortisol. So is cortisol good or bad? Yes. Obviously, much of it is not good. Too little of it is not good. Like so many things in the body, it has to be maintained in a specific balance. But about 30 minutes before we wake up, our body floods our system, our brain does, with cortisol. And this is a form of allostasis because the body is deviating from its resting state and trying to prepare us for the metabolic demands of awaking. So it's like, okay, that alarm clock's going to go. Cortisol, here we go, mobilize. And we got cortisol flooding in because I'm ready to be awake
Yeah.
and wakeful and get on with my day and do amazing things.
Yes. And we
Um,
need that stress. We actually
we
have to have
do.
that stress to be productive and to actually do things.
Yes.
So, yes, cortisol is not neither good nor bad. It just can add up over time, or we don't get rid of it when it's not being helpful.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Things like how high altitude acclimatization, I think is really interesting. That if you're in high altitude for a time, I live just like 4 feet above sea level. We're not very high here, so I don't get this. But when we vacation to Park City, Utah, or places like that, I definitely feel it. But if you're there for more extended periods, your body starts to create more red blood cells to carry more oxygen because there's less oxygen where you're at. And this shift creates a new temporary set point that aids with functioning and survival. beautiful kind of example of allostasis. Bears. I don't know if you have any where you live. We don't have a lot down here, but
There are some bears. My neighbor's a bear hunter.
yeah,
He
okay.
he
Yeah.
does bear traps, and yes, tell me about bears though.
My mother or my stepmom used to live in Alaska for 25 years, and they would regularly visit their garbage can. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, adventures we don't have in the desert. But just the hibernation, the increase of fat storage, this represents a massive psychological shift because if you're going to sleep for 4 months, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, things like callus formation, even just things as silly as that, that is an expression or a form of allostasis. You got tight shoes on or whatever, body responds by creating more skin cells to protect that area or provide greater stability. So
Yeah.
that's
Cool.
probably enough. You know, one of the big ones, though, I got to just add this one. It's pregnancy. Pregnancy is a superb example of allostasis because the body's undergoing this radical metabolic and immune changes to support a fetus. And so there's all kinds of things that are happening to get to a new normal place where the body can execute its primary function while it's pregnant.
Yeah. Weight gain.
Weight gain,
Weight
yes.
gain. So your appetite changes. You're more thirsty because you need to increase your blood volume.
Yes.
Yeah, your hips and your joints become more loose so that you can prepare for birth. Yeah, lots of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really kind of exciting. Allostasis is just one more miracles
Of the body.
within the context, yeah, of our bodies. But like I said, it just becomes problematic when we can't return to baseline, when we start accumulating kind of load. Sometimes I think of this metaphorically in a couple different ways. I'm really big into metaphors, so you just have to excuse me. But
Keep them coming. No, I think people learn that way.
sometimes I think of my body as having this biological budget of energy and resources.
Mhm.
So every demand on my system subtracts from that budget. So let's say I just start out with 100. It's a Friday and it's a beautiful day and it's 66 degrees in Mesa, Arizona. I'm at 100. Maybe I'm metabolizing a very sugary meal and that's 6 points off. Maybe I'm suppressing an emotional memory. Maybe I've had a bit of an argument with my spouse. Not that that has ever happened, but hypothetically, I've heard it could. Yeah, yes. I use some moisturizer perhaps on my face. My body's trying to neutralize the chemical toxins in that. So that's another kind of withdrawal from that. So all of these things are hits on our energy and resources because I'm asking my body
Yeah.
to adapt to a change in environment or certain things that are coming into my body, whether I'm thinking them, whether I'm absorbing them, whether I'm eating them, whether I'm breathing them. And we'll talk more about that. Or, hey, I got a bonus. Sometimes I like to just liken it to a load in the truck, just using the word load. Pick your truck, and up a hill, and these things can increase the load in the truck. So I get cut off in traffic. I have that difficult conversation. I keep replaying some trauma I had last week.
Yeah.
I have a very unhealthy meal. So it's just one more thing in the back of the truck. It's one more thing in the back of the truck. First, you don't feel it, and there's no real load on the engine. You know, I'm not laboring. But after a time, if I can offload those things fairly quickly and get back to baseline, no big deal. But if I don't, then the load can I can become very labored.
Yeah. Taxing.
Taxing, exactly, and pulling the load up the hill.
Yeah. Okay. So how would we know if we had that load?
Well,
Do you want to
all
talk
right.
about that?
So, yeah, let's talk about that. So,
Or what do
what
you want to talk about
contribute?
first?
Let's talk about what contributes to the load. Can we do
Okay. Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Let's do that.
What does a load even look like?
Yeah. So what does a
So,
load look like for our body? So we talked about the truck metaphorically. So what does a high allostatic load for a human body look like?
yeah, let's talk about that. And actually, this may be a little superfluous or more than is needed, but I kind of broke it up into five that how it affects your body, how it affects your mind, what you think, feel, and your relationships, your environment, your fuel is what you eat and drink. So Maybe let's start with that. Can we start with mind? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
let's start with mind.
I'm going in reverse order. And this is probably the most recognized, and the most self-evident, but just chronic psychological stress. It can be work pressure,
Yeah.
it can be financial worry, perfectionism, emotional suppression, unprocessed grief, resentment, anger. The list goes on and on. All of those things can represent a substantial load if they're not dealt with. And those things sometimes can hang on for a very long time.
Oh, very long
And the
time.
load almost becomes like intransigent, meaning we can't get rid of it. It's difficult to work through.
Yeah.
Cognitive load, we might call that like information overload. Constant multitasking. And we all think we're really good at it, right? I can multitask. My wife says, no, actually, you cannot. Go to timeout and think about your behavior because you cannot multitask. And it's really interesting that, and I will have some of these silly asides that I find fascinating, but pretty good science and research suggests that about 2.5% of the population actually has the capacity to multitask. And yet
We all are doing it all the time.
we all are doing it all the time, right?
We claim to be
And
doing it.
yes. So we're not really handling things simultaneously. We're code switching. Our
Yeah.
brain rapidly shifts from one activity to the other. And there's all kinds of downstream fallout by virtue of that. So most of us don't think of that can add to information overload. I'm sorry, to allostatic load. It's just, you know, our illusion that we can multitask and do it well. Let's see. What else? Past unresolved trauma. This is a big one. And I'm not a therapist, and I know you're not either. So I'm always really careful in having this conversation. But developmental trauma can really rewrite the nervous system in really profound ways and place people in this perpetual state of anticipatory threat. That can create a real constant sort of background drain on the system. Great book. It was written by Bessel van Dierkolk, but MD, The Body Keeps the Score. And it just gives you a really good sense of how trauma can affect the body and adds considerably to that kind of load. And sometimes that's the long-term protracted load. I found interesting with some clients, I've used things like there's the ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and they have like childhood trauma questionnaires. You can just go online and you can look at these. And
I think it's a
sometimes,
good thing for everyone to do.
yeah, I think so too. And these are not intended to be diagnostic. I would never try to diagnose somebody
Oh,
heaven
yeah.
forbid, based on that, or even draw too many conclusions. But you can take these inventories online for free, and it does help you, I think, to identify areas that maybe need further evaluation and maybe some trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
If nothing else, perhaps it just heightens the awareness that I need to have some conversations around this.
Yeah, for sure, because awareness is the first step. And I talk about this a lot in my podcast of our blueprint, our nervous system blueprint, and adverse childhood experiences are a huge factor in how we show up, how we see ourselves in the world, and yes, how we prepare, or we are hypervigilant or hyper independent for
Yes.
reasons that are not needed anymore. Maybe they were when we were 2 or 4 or 7, but now that we're 40, 50, we can relax.
I heard you chuckle when you said that.
I'm
Do
talking
not
about
need-
myself?
We don't need to elaborate. No. Yeah.
Yes. We can let go of that hyper independence for sure. Yes, we were just talking about that.
Yeah. Yes, but old habits do die hard, don't they? So I think relationships, and we talk about the relational and social load, loneliness and isolation. That is interesting. It is an epidemic in our society. It's like, how is that even possible? We're also connected, right? Different podcast, I know, for a different day. But it's fascinating, even levels of loneliness amongst youth that are so much more connected than they ever be. We're more connected and we're more lonely. I found it interesting. His name was Vivek Murphy, and he was one of our past Surgeon Generals. But he said loneliness is as harmful to the body and the brain as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And I don't think he was just being hyperbolic or exaggerating. I think that was based on some science,
Yeah.
that it is so harmful. Things like you increase premature death risk by 26% from loneliness. Social isolation raises risk of developing dementia by 50%. Those are stunning statistics, I think. So obviously that adds to the load considerably. Not having relationships can. Dysfunctional relationships on the other side of the continuum, obviously, probably even more common. Conflict, instability in relationships, insecure attachment. We have this psychobiological kind of turmoil dealing with that. And often people can't get away from those because it's in their home, it's in their workplace, it's caregiver burden. The sandwich generation, you hear a little bit about that. My father-in-law died in December, and he lived an abundant, beautiful 87-year life. But he left my mother-in-law, who's probably in the 5th stage of dementia, and they were living independently. And so I've watched this with my wife, who was the only girl out of 6 kids. And it's been the primary kind of caretaker and to try to, organize things and move through transition and those kinds of things with her mother. And I have seen her load, quintuple, whatever. I don't know if I can quantify it, but it's been considerable. So I know a lot of people are dealing with that too. Let me just skip down a few others, like environment, air and water pollution. That adds to the load. You live in areas where you have HPA, high pollution advisories, and you're breathing air. That's a load. The toxicity is a load on the body. Endocrine disrupting chemicals, and this is a tough one to talk about, but just things in cosmetic and skincare and your toothpaste and that kind of stuff. I have an app, and I'm not trying to advocate for it because there's probably others out there that may be every bit as good or better, but it's called Think Dirty. And I think it's probably got like 3 million different products in it. And it allows me to scan a UPC or a barcode on a product, and then it gives me a bit of a profile. And it's like, I had no idea. And I'm looking at some of this stuff going, yikes, that is a really dirty product relative to the load it's putting in my body. There's all kinds of toxins and there's chemicals that are not well tolerated by the body. I could live for 500 years and never even have an awareness of that kind of stuff. Until I
What's
kind
the
of
app called?
It's called Think Dirty. Yeah.
Think
And I
Dirty. Okay.
and I just use the free version. But so much of life, and I know you talk about this a lot in your podcast, is just creating different levels of awareness and then having good information upon which we can act. The things that we eat and drink, this can add to the load tremendously. Poor diets. I know it's just almost trite to go there. Ultra-processed food, sugars, unhealthy fats. It creates oxidative stress, systemic inflammation. We talk so much about that anymore. It's interesting. So according to the American Heart Association, the average American consumes over 60 pounds of added sugar in a year.
Or more if you live in my house and you're my kids.
Yeah. You guys
Just
could
kidding.
be 61. And overachievers could be 121.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that's added sugar. If you eat an apple, doesn't count. If you eat a banana, doesn't count. The sugar in skim milk doesn't count. The Reese's peanut butter cup counts. So that
maybe we're doing better than we say. My kids say we eat too many vegetables, but and don't buy enough junk food. Yeah. I think we buy plenty.
Good job, Mom. Yeah. It's a very relative thing, isn't it? Yeah, your definition of plenty and their definition of plenty, yeah,
are different. Yes,
maybe just a little different. Yeah, and then there's food sensitivities and things like that. Gut dysbiosis. That's just an imbalanced gut microbiome.
Yep. Which does affect your mental health also.
Oh.
Your gut and your brain are, again, another podcast for another day, but they are hugely connected.
You are absolutely right. They're hugely connected. Daniel Amen, who I appreciate, he's a neurosurgeon and scientist, and probably has done more brain scans than anybody on the planet. He says this is the number one, fact of life. What you do to your body, you do to your brain. And so whatever we do to our body, when I rub that lotion on my body, it's affecting my brain in some way. It's interesting in terms of what they're finding more and more, because this is a part of my coaching. I coach in the health space too, just more of this holistic, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. But they're learning more and more that it's about the diversity of foods that we eat that helps reduce the load and helps just empower our bodies to function just more according to design. So experts are recommending anymore that you have at least, this would be a minimum, of 30 different plant foods a week.
Wow.
Just
30.
let that
Okay.
just let that hang for a minute.
30 different. So don't eat
So
the same salad every day.
so how would you do relative to that? Not to put you on the spot, but what do you think if you were just to?
Yeah, no. Well, like I often make a salad, pre-made salads for the week, but they are all the same.
Yeah.
Same, cherry tomatoes, same green mix, same cucumber, pepper, kale. I really like kale. But how could you change that? So you could add different spices. You could switch out the vegetables. You could have the same base and cucumbers. Oh, but to get 30. Yeah. So there's sweet potatoes. There's different varieties. Are they counting different varieties of the same?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So like cucumber,
That's fair.
English cucumber, banana squash, acorn squash. I become much better at substituting my pasta with zucchini and squash.
Excellent.
That's how
Yeah.
I get more vegetables. And there are even two males in my house now that make themselves a breakfast smoothie with fruits and vegetables in it.
Oh, I love it. Good for
And
them.
yes, I'm very proud of them. So we're
Yeah,
trying. We're trying
that's
over here.
beautiful. Yeah. I have a smoothie that I do practically every day of my life, and it has 20 ingredients.
20 different
And
ingredients.
almost every
Okay.
single one of those are single ingredient foods.
Okay.
Flaxseed, chia, banana, spinach, that kind of thing, So
Uh-huh.
really, when you start looking at it, that doesn't seem so impossible. I know people hear that. And it's because if you incorporate vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, like you mentioned, herbs, spices, all those things are plant derived.
Yeah.
But it can have such an enriching, empowering benefit to our microbiome, which is so powerful. Did I mention this? So many doctors call it the second brain. And it's interesting that one of your happy hormones, serotonin, which we all want lots of serotonin, 95% of it is produced in the microbiome or in the gut. So that's really important. Dehydration can greatly increase allostatic load. If you're dehydrated, it activates the sympathetic nervous system. Anyway, there's others. Chronic sleep, we all know about that. Sedentary behavior, just not moving. Bodies are meant to move. And some bodies are very limited in that respect. But moving to the degree that we can move, because if we don't, it promotes inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. Autoimmune disease, something near and dear to my heart, that the body maintain a constant high level immune response. And so people that are struggling with autoimmune disease, I think they need to be particularly aware of the load and understanding, at least to some level, of allostatic load, this conversation. Because just the baseline load that is presented to the body or imposed upon the body based on an autoimmune disease can be significant. Okay, so that's probably enough of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on to. Okay. So we are actually going to take a break because our conversation went on for quite a while and it was very interesting. I hope you're learning something. I'm just going to make a quick recap before we head into the second half because this topic is so important and honestly, it explains so much to me about why high achievers and caregivers can look fine on the outside while their body is quietly keeping score. Little side story. When I was in nursing school at University of Utah, I had a pathophysiology class. And one of the things that stuck out to me was when we were talking about stress. Maybe this was just a foreshadowing of this current career, but I remember she was talking about stress and type A personalities. And she said, type A personalities are the most unhealthy and dangerous personality to have because
You have all of this physiology going on the inside of you, and you look fine on the outside because this stress is taking this wear and tear of your whole body. And I thought, ding, ding, pay attention. Anyway, and that is my experience working with a lot of healthcare workers and overachievers, is that yes, on the outside, we might look totally fine, but the body is quietly keeping score on the inside. So let's recap of part one. Brent and I started talking about defining allostasis. And if you've heard of the word homeostasis, your body wanting to keep balance, this is related, but allostasis is a little bit more dynamic. Allostasis is the process that your body uses to adapt to something when something changes. And it's your internal stabilizing system. The examples we shared were shivering when you're cold, sweating when it's hot outside, producing insulin after you eat something that has sugar or carbohydrates, cortisol rising before you wake up in the morning so that you can actually get going. Those are all normal examples of allostasis. And Brent made it clear that allostasis is not the problem. It's literally how you survive and function. But where it does become a problem is when your body keeps having to do that over and over and over again, and it doesn't actually get a chance to rest. The stress cycle does not complete. And that's where allostatic load comes in. And Brent describes it as the wear and tear on the body. When your stress response is constantly activated or fails to shut off properly. And I love the way he explained it. He said stress is like revving your engine. Revving isn't bad, right? That's what engines are supposed to do. That's what they're made for. But if the revving is high and you're running at a high RPM for long periods of time and you do not come back down, that's when the engine starts breaking down. That's when you hit burnout. That's when autoimmune disorders start. That's when we're gaining extra weight. That's when our blood pressure goes high. And we talk about that actually in the second half. But I also love the metaphor of a truck carrying a load. At first, you don't really notice it, right? It's one stressful conversation, one hard shift, one night of poor sleep, not a big deal. But you add one more thing. You have a sick kid and another. Your bills are late, and another, your car broke down. And maybe you're suppressing all of these emotions, trying to keep things together. Maybe you're carrying unprocessed grief on top of that. There's additional conflict at home. Maybe you're going through a divorce. Maybe you're lonely. Maybe you're in caregiver mode all the time, and your nervous system is living in hypervigilance because of old trauma patterns that were once protective, but are not needed anymore in the same way. So now we have this truck and it's climbing up the hill with a heavier and heavier and heavier load. And all we are is adding to it, right? We're not taking out. And so eventually you start to feel it. You get tired. You get very reactive, right? Your window of tolerance starts to shrink because you're already carrying so much. You can't recover like you used to, and your body just stays on all the time. We talk specifically how this shows up for healthcare workers. You can go from room to room for 12 hours surrounded by other people's stress, pain, urgency, high stakes. Your body can absolutely rise to that moment. But again, the key question is, does it come back down? Or do you replay it on your way home? Do you carry it home and take it out on your family members? Do you show up the next day with it still being activated and you're still dysregulated and your body is still bracing for the next stress load? This is real life. And then we began outlining what actually contributes to the allostatic load across a few categories. What's happening in your mind. So there's chronic stress, there's perfectionism, there's emotional suppression, there's information overload, right? People can get decision fatigue from all this information. There's unresolved trauma. There's allostatic load in your relationships, which is huge. I've talked about Arthur Brooks before and how he says relationships is one of the biggest indicators of your health, and good relationships are good. However, we are currently in an epidemic of loneliness. We are in political conflicts, opinion conflicts, instability, caregiver burdens. And so our relationships matter, and our environment. Remember, pollution, chemicals, toxins, your fuel that you eat, and your lifestyle. So ultra processed foods, added sugar, your gut health, your microbiome diversity, your hydration, your sleep, your movement, all of that kind of thing. We even touched on powerful connections between the body and the brain, which I love. This is why I drink kefir. We didn't say this online, but both Brent and I drink apple cider vinegar. He probably does it way more than I do. He is kind of a zealot that way, but gut health is important. I grow my own kefir, eating sourdough bread, eating yogurt. They have those sodas now. I'm not advertising those. I don't know, but they're made with apple cider vinegar because the gut is sometimes called the second brain. So after that recap, if you're listening and thinking, okay, so if this is why I feel totally maxed out and stressed, you are not crazy. That is true. Your system may be doing exactly what it was designed to do. It could be even overachieving, and it's just doing it too often for too long without enough recovery. So in part 2, we are going to pick up right where we left off, exactly, actually, and talk about how to recognize allostatic load in real life, what actually helps to start lowering the load so that your body can come back to baseline again and the conversation continues. So come back next week for part 2 of allostatic load. Every week, you're learning something new here on this podcast, and that is a powerful first step. But guess what? Information alone doesn't create transformation. True change happens when you start to think differently and shift the nervous system patterns that drive your behavior. As a coach and an emotional resiliency expert, that is the work I do. I love to walk alongside you, whether it's one-on-one, in a small group that you choose, or with your workplace team. I can help you retrain your brain and nervous system so that stress no longer runs the show. You'll find ways to connect with me in the show notes. Let's do this work together.